out of closed session. Do we have to have a motion to close closed
Yeah.
session?
To close closed session.
Yeah, with,
I make the motion that we return to open session from closed session.
Support.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
I thought
Opposed?
we discussed roll call vote to come out
No,
prior
the
to.
roll call vote has to be on
The
the
roll call
decision.
vote
Okay,
will be
I
on the decision.
misunderstood. I apologize.
Okay, we have a motion coming out of closed session.
I would make a motion to approve the settlement of $25,000 as recommended by the township's attorney and insurance carrier in Hypel versus Holly Township.
Is there support?
Second.
Motion by Winchester, support by Kinnaman. I need a roll call vote, please.
Richard Kinnaman,
Yes.
Derek Burton,
Yes.
Jennifer Ryan,
Yes.
Michael McCanny,
Yes.
Karen Winchester, yes, Ryan Mattson,
Yes,
George Cullis.
No. Motion carries 6-1. That will take us into the budget workshop. Now,
Thank you.
thank you.
thank you. In front of you, you have the documents for the workshop. Most of this you're pretty much aware of because we did the budget with the 3-year and 5-year portions when we were talking about the bond in regards to the financial advisor that was here. We are recommending some changes that you see on this where it says proposed budget and the general fund. One of the things we're recommending is a 2.5% cost of living increase. There are no raises in this budget this year. That takes you through that. The deputy treasurer is submitting is it in here?
No,
Yeah.
it'll be part of the.
It'll be part of
The
it.
resolution and
The
everything.
deputy treasurer is recommending a step increase, or the treasurer is recommending a step increase for the deputy treasurer.
Based on our step,
Yeah, which is
Based
supposed to be
on
about
his
every
step
year
process.
since she's been here for 2
Yep.
years and
Okay.
she's done all the things that she should have in those
Mhm.
2 years.
The other thing that we're recommending in this budget is to take the code enforcement officer, which is Amy Hillman, and bring her pay salary in line with the other two, make her the deputy supervisor. She's been taking on a lot of different projects, managing them, doing our social media, writing grants and so forth. And we want to create parity between that position and the other two deputies. So that is another part of the budget. If you want to go, if anybody feels like we need to go through the budget line by line, we can do that. The second page is the payroll portion of the budget, so that clarifies for everybody what's there. It shows you the steps in actual numbers that are put out there.
Well, seeing that, so that's what I will ask for clarification on. And I do appreciate that you're coming back for doing the steps, but I assume because we approved the grades, we approved the steps that were brought to us, that it would just be more of an automatic.
Yeah, it'll be in like the budget resolution, like we have everyone's payroll in the budget resolution, it'll be the same thing. It's just more of like an explanation of why the pay is
The
increasing.
reason we show
more
it
than
here,
two
Derek,
and a half.
is we have new board members,
Okay,
so they understand.
It's not like each thing has to be reapproved. It's,
No,
When we approve the budget.
it's an
just so you
explanation.
understand,
Where
a
is-
couple of years back, when
how
he
the decisions, yeah.
when the
Mhm.
treasurer announced he was retiring, he also announced that under the old system, that when he left, the deputy treasurer went with him. There was no security for the employees in the township because the deputy clerk, the deputy treasurer, they are connected to the elected official. What I did in that budget that year, Derek, you were on the board,
Mhm.
as was Steve Ruth, and Mark, you weren't here yet either. We changed their classification and we made them clerks in the office. Then for the deputy part, we give them a stipend, which is $100 a month. So when the treasurer leaves, he can't just say she's coming with me, or she doesn't have a job and you have to wait till they're reappointed. At the same time, if you had an election where they swept the board and new people came in, those deputies wouldn't automatically be out, they would remain as employees of the township.
Yeah.
So it gives the township some security in the fact that you got somebody that knows what's going on. And at the same time, it gives the employee security to not worry, if my boss doesn't get elected, I'm out of a job.
Right,
Yeah,
they're not
That's
solely
a
appointed.
hard
So it
pill
changed
to
the
swallow
dynamics.
and- Yeah.
The board talked about it at the time during the budget. It was discussed that perhaps we should have 3 steps. Somebody else said 5 steps. We talked about the salaries. I took everything from that workshop, laid it out. I came into the meeting when I presented the budget, and I said, what you will find in here is everybody got something, nobody got everything in regards to what they wanted. And I laid it all out, and I talked about, one of the things was that Steve Ruth at that time had wanted 10% raise, because we had done a salary study and we were woefully behind where the salary should be. And part of that was because they got frozen during the recession,
Mhm.
they got frozen during COVID, and they never they never recouped. At the time, Steve Ruth had said that the elected officials should get 10% and the employees should get 20% raise. Well, the problem with that was the 10% raise for the elected officials was almost more than what the employees were getting. So when I came back, we made the employees whole that year, which meant there were raises as high as 38% for one employee. But it brought them up to a standard that was equal to what the job was worth. And we had no raises for the elected officials till the next year.
And then they were just standard.
And it went into the budget then and brought everybody up to what that salary study had done. Now, one of the other things that I will propose when we bring you the final budget is, how did we end up with the elected officials being so far apart from the employees? Well, the reason that happens, and I'm going to use some round numbers just to give you an example. If I have an employee at $40,000, and for example, 2 years ago, we had an 8% cost of living, because that's where the rate of cost of living was. That employee gets 8 times 4 is $3,200 raise. If the elected official's making $60,000 times 8, they get even a bigger raise. And it creates this distance between the two. What several of the townships have gone to is they've taken the salary of the elected officials, they've taken the salary of the employees, and they've said that salary is a percentage of this salary. It may be 70%, 74%, we're working on those numbers. Or did you have?
I
that?
have the numbers for where we're at right now, and we had talked about, you could either make it a set thing, or just say, hey, if it goes below a certain amount, then you need to bump it up. Where is it? That's these numbers. So right now, in this budget, it's at 74%.
So there's a 74% is the difference?
And when we originally created the STEP program, it was actually 73%, so it's pretty much stayed consistent.
Yeah. So what my recommendation was gonna be to this board, and it would be a separate motion in regards to that, but it would be part of my budget going forward. My recommendation was that we make that part of our policies and procedures. Then going forward, if there's a cost of living, then you just say there's a cost of living of 2% for the elected officials, and that the amount of money that the employees get is automatic because it stays within that percentage. I know some of the other townships are at 76%, but they're all in that 75, 74, right around there. But that stops that part where the elected officials keep growing and the workforce is losing ground. And so,
Changes the disparity.
Mhm.
yep, so it hits the elected officials, and then the number for the employees is an automatic number based on the percentage. Any questions?
And
That'll
then,
be a policy and procedures
Well, I said it'll
adjustment
be a separate
or
approval, but
amendment,
that's what
yeah.
I'll be
Yeah.
recommending, but
and how is that then played out with the STEP system as well?
When I looked at it, all the steps were 95% of the step above it. So I would assume that if you had, say you set it so that it's 75%, you would make step step 5 be 75%, and then
Okay.
step 4 would be 95% of that going forward. And that's where it was set up when they originally created the steps too, it was like 95%.
So it would be based off the top step.
Because you would actually, if you don't keep it at that 95%, you're eventually gonna have big gaps between the steps too.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
Yep, so it just makes the math fair and equitable
Because
again.
you're saying step 5 is the 74, or so whatever.
Right.
Step 5 is
Eventually,
the top.
because that's the top,
Right.
beside the elected officials, so they're the
Yeah.
one that's gonna be 75%,
And-
let's say, of the elected official, and then each step below is 95% of step 5.
Yes.
Like, for
Mhm.
the
Right,
step-
right, keep
the
going
step,
down.
the
Yeah.
step one, yeah, okay. I
And
understand.
just so you understand the steps, let me make this clear too. The steps were, it came from trustee Burton and trustee Ruth. And the steps were created because if you hire somebody new, or before this all happened, if you hired in as the deputy clerk or treasurer, you had one number, that's what you made. The deputy clerk and the treasurer made the same dollar amount. Well, the problem we had was, we've got a deputy treasurer that has 16, 17 years.
You mean clerk?
Clerk,
I'm
yeah.
s- What'd I say?
Yeah,
Treasurer?
18
I'm
years.
sorry, 18 years. We hired a deputy treasurer, that it was their first time in municipal
Mhm.
government. So there was a lot of training that needed to happen, a lot of learning, and it didn't seem fair that that person made the same thing that the person up front
Yeah.
had. And the person up front had to keep stopping to help the other person learn. So we created the steps. They're designed for every 2 years. However, it is based on a recommendation from the treasurer or from the clerk. The treasurer can write a letter and say, this person's learned what they need to do. They need to, they've learned and done what they're supposed to do. They're eligible for the step increase. At the same time, the treasurer or clerk could come out and write a report that said, they are picking it up, not as fast as I had hoped. We've got some areas to work, and they can stall that
Mhm.
step increase for another year to get up to the standards that are there to learn. Once you've gotten to step 5, that's 10 years. It's kind of considered that you know everything you need to know,
Mhm.
and it just stays. It doesn't step you all the way out until you're gone.
Right.
But once you've achieved that step 5 classification, then you're there. The only thing that would give a person more money in that particular instance is if they took on additional duties outside their job descriptions. And so, you know, we are working collectively, collaboratively, yeah, however you want to look at it, on defining those job descriptions to be more specific than they've been in the past. So we're putting a lot of that stuff in order. And it's kind of, I can't begin to tell you how wonderful it is to have this 7-member board and the opportunity it gives us in administration to work in the office. Karen and I worked through, Karen and I worked through the period when you couldn't talk to the other person. And Jen did too for a little bit.
Mhm.
It made it difficult sometimes. In your predecessor, it made it really difficult because he was constantly convinced that we were plotting against him. And it wasn't the case. It's just you couldn't, 3 of you talk because it was an OMA violation.
Yeah.
So it's really worked out
Yeah,
well.
it really has.
And then the knowledge of this young lady coming in has made a huge difference as well.
Absolutely.
I don't sing your praises enough, perhaps, but I know I've told you before. So,
So what's the final valuable product out of this workshop? What are we working towards?
it's for you guys to understand the budget,
Yeah, have all your
so
questions
that when we
answered.
actually get into a
Object
meeting.
if you object.
Okay,
And if, obviously, by the time we go
Add
to
to
something to
if-
adopt, there might be changes, like we said, like we've notes in here, like the assessing contract with the county is kind of in flux right now, so if we have changes, we'll bring that to you.
Mhm.
And we'd only be adopting the next year's budget. It has the 5 years in there for informational and to look forward and see what we think things are gonna look like. But we would
Mhm.
only, once we go to adopt, not at this meeting, it would only be next year's fiscal year 26 budget.
But to
So
answer
the-
your question, the purpose of this meeting is to be able to have these discussions. Because if you think about it, if we spend 45 minutes talking about the budget, answering everybody's questions, if you had to put that in the middle of a monthly meeting with all the other stuff that's there,
yeah.
you're not gonna get out of here till 10:30. We've had that happen.
Right.
So we moved it to a budget workshop so that when it's actually on the agenda, there should be a minimum amount of questions. Because
If
everybody
any,
will have
other
already.
than the changes, like, we do expect the assessing contract
Yeah.
to increase. We just don't know how much.
Right, and we don't know if it'll affect 26 or if it won't really hit until
Till the next,
forward years,
Right.
yeah, so we're
But,
just.
but this just gives you a chance to look at it and, you know,
ask
you could say,
questions even.
I don't understand what this
call,
is.
You know.
We can go page by page if you want.
Well, it all looks pretty remedial, but is there anything in this budget that we should be paying attention to? Where is the sticking point?
I would say some of the big things in here, now, first of all, we went and we put the bond and project information in there based on our conversation.
What page is that on?
Doesn't mean,
What-
again, that you have to issue bonds, but it's saying that we have the debt service payments in there, which is in the general fund. We have the transfers to the capital improvement fund, all of that stuff is in here so that you can see what the fund balance looks like
Right.
with the debt and the project in there.
Okay,
I would also say one of the other, staffing changes we put in there is the hope that, like we said, we're turning the deputy supervisor in, or the code enforcement officer into the deputy supervisor. She's not gonna immediately stop code enforcing, but the idea is to hopefully have a person who is zoning administration, which Karen has been taking on as an extra duty and cannot just keep doing forever, and does
Yeah,
not want to
can't-
keep doing forever.
There's so much and so
Yeah.
much we have going on that I need to attend to outside of that and
Mhm.
everything else that I can't possibly
And, and just to give you
keep
an
doing
idea,
it. I just can't.
when I came in as supervisor, because you've been here a long time, but when I came in as supervisor 8 years ago, we had 15 permits in the building department.
We are so busy.
Now we've got 67 homes coming in, Shannon's coming in, people are adding on to houses.
Land
It's changed
divisions,
dramatically.
there's
Mobile homes.
We have the mobile homes
we-
coming in,
they're-
we have the
yes.
subdivisions that are starting to develop. So the job has changed dramatically over the years as the township grows.
yeah.
So we've built some of that into the budget.
Yeah,
as
so
well.
there's a position in there, and we haven't fully decided how that looks yet, cause it kinda depends on what we can get. But a position that would be like zoning and code enforcement, ideally. Now, we don't know if that's one full-time person, if that's 2 part-time people, or if that's even some of that being contracted out. Part of it too is that code enforcement would hopefully ideally not be someone who lives here. As much as that sounds good on paper, it makes it very, people take things personally.
It's
when it's your
becoming a real
neighbor.
problem.
It's been a real issue for Amy, because she went to school here, she grew up here, many of those people live here, and it becomes personal.
See, and not, cause now we're proactive, so you're bringing in more people that into the mix.
Mhm.
And now, and there's some, yeah, it's just a bad,
So
Thank
the
you.
additional person or people, that salary is built in.
It's
Yes,
always-
that is
it's
included
here
in
as
the
well.
budget as well, yeah.
Mhm.
And we included the insurance benefits and things like that, so if it ends up being some kind of contracted work, you would just pull that from the salary and benefits that we built into the budget to help pay, so that it should be the same either way,
Relatively
cost-wise,
even
I think,
Yeah.
yeah.
cause our planner, the company that does our planning does that kind of work. So it's something that we could
Already
maybe
have
temporarily while we're looking for that right person. So we had a lot of conversations, so that's still all in the works, but, and somehow, anyway, I mean, I'm getting to that point where I have to think about when I'm retiring too. So that transition, I want there to be a lot of time to transition and get to that. And then I was saying, I wanna be able to be in the earshot of them too, because I wanna know how they're answering the questions, you know, and how they're,
Just part of the training.
yeah,
Yeah.
training. And that takes a while, because
Right.
Yeah, cause that's a
they
little
not
concern is
necessarily
where
have to
do they
live here
sit
either.
in the office. Cause we have an extra desk in our office, but that doesn't necessarily help Karen, I mean, they could eventually sit there, but like, during training, you want them close to the person training them, so that's been a conversation as
And
well.
Yeah.
I
Is
think it
where
helps,
they go until we have a new building, right?
I think it also helps to understand that Karen's been in this position for 25 years. Prior to my coming in the office, the supervisor was part-time, and he wasn't here during the day. So a lot of that fell on Karen's shoulders. When she came in the office, the treasurer had been here since, the 1950s? And the treasurer was still doing things handwritten in ledgers. Karen had to introduce computers to the township and then try to teach Bernice
Bernice.
how to enter that stuff.
Yeah.
And if Bernice was anything like me, that wasn't an easy task either.
it was,
Computers aren't my thing.
yeah.
Well, over the years, as things have changed, a lot of that stuff has been in Karen's office. One of the things you notice is we're taking accounts payable and putting them back in the treasurer's office where they should have been all along.
Yeah, I've done that.
We're moving cemetery work from the clerk's office to the treasurer's office because the treasurer's office has that time available to handle those things. And it
when we
lightens the
did
load
the
from
hiring,
everything.
we were planning on that. We had said, okay, you know, that they will have the ability to do these things.
Well,
It's just, I just
and-
kept on hanging on, you know, till it became a crisis.
Well,
Now I'm in a crisis and
Well,
then,
we've made the joke before that we're gonna have to tear it out of Karen's hands to get it out. But another example is, Christie handles all the elections. Talk about the difference between absentee ballots from just 8 years ago to now.
oh,
How many did we have then
Oh
versus
my
how many do we
gosh.
have now? And all the additional stuff that has to be done for the election.
oh, they keep
In-house
on
voting.
adding. It gets to be very difficult now for us to
But what's the number
administrate.
change?
It was like maybe 800 to like 3,500 now.
That's a big change. You know,
Right, but-
if you vision the office downstairs,
Right, with just
they used to have
the
to
two
lay
of
out a
us.
4x8 table, or, you know, an 8-foot table to handle alphabetically keeping all of the absentee ballots, 800 of them. Now, all of a sudden, you gotta do 3,500. The trays start getting stacked higher, they start sitting over here, they start sitting over there. The voting machines have been sitting out in the hallway. I mean, there's so much more that's being done now than what was done 8 years ago. The growth has just been exponential. And I know that this office is so used to eating lunch at their desk that they don't even think about it anymore. But in what world do you eat lunch and the people walk over right over the top of you and talk to you while you're eating?
Right.
And it happens all the time because there's nowhere to go.
There's
unless
no
you leave-
downtime.
Unless you leave the building,
Right.
Yeah.
you know, so.
Yeah, and then-
Well, this is really easily read. This is very good. It's not very confusing. It's all laid out well. I think it's good just to be able to look at. It's very well done.
I'm glad you liked it, cause I was worried you guys were gonna be like, oh my god, numbers is too much.
So I will ask a question here. I'm
Especially
just
'cause
curious
it's
of how the ending fund balance is able to stay the same for the next
Because,
5 fiscal years, it looks like,
um,
to what it is currently.
Well, part of that is we're not necessarily putting a lot of cash from the general fund into the project because most of it, a big chunk of it would be from the bonds, and then most of it's already in the capital improvement fund. It's already been
Oh,
transferred
'cause
there.
we
There's over
transferred,
$1 million in the capital improvement fund. Another part of that
Gotcha.
is the sale of the 2 buildings, or
Yes.
properties.
Okay.
There's a sale of the 49 acres on Fish Lake and the sale of this building, so that helps replenish the fund balance.
Okay, yep. Now, I did forget about it being transferred over, so yeah, that would be, thank you.
Anybody else with questions?
So is this, is this the entire budget? Is this like the CAFR that's reported to the Oakland County, or is this just a section of the budget?
So that report is the actual final results. That's your like annual financials. So this is the budget, so it's like what you're thinking is gonna happen, and then
Right.
that is what actually happens. But we are missing one fund, and that is the fire fund, because there's the contract and their budget's not finished yet, so we can't do our part of it until that part's done.
Okay.
I actually, Matt's here with us this evening. I'm actually the one that pulled that off the table because it doesn't make sense for me to put numbers down here when we're in the middle of negotiations.
Yeah, that's fine.
So we left those off. Understand that the only part that goes on this budget for the fire department is the money we collect and the money we pay them. They have their own budget, which we will work on at the NACFA board. That will get approved by the board, and once that approved, it comes back basically to get ratified by this board and Rose Township board.
Hmm.
And the expectation is that when it comes back to this board, it will be approved, because as we do that budget, Karen and I being on the board, Brad Stillwell and Debbie Miller on their board, we know what our numbers are, what we can afford to pay. Now, unfortunately, a couple of years ago, what happened was Rose Township took the completed budget that they worked on, that they helped put together,
And approved.
went back to their township and approved,
Right,
and then said, their treasurer said, I didn't realize, but we have a $357,000 shortfall. And they didn't approve the budget, which meant that we had to go back to NACFA and redo the budget.
well, and he went after the salaries.
And
then-
his intent was to slash everybody's salaries. And in that meeting, I said, no, you just need to tell us what number you can do. It's the chief's job to decide where to make the cuts, not yours.
Yeah.
That's what created the union that we have.
Mhm.
That,
Yeah.
and the very next month, and you can't make this stuff up, I'm sorry. The very next month, that same treasurer had on the agenda to move $1 million for fund balance and put it into investment because they had too much. You can't make that up. But that is what got us the union. And I said to them, and then I didn't blame them.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, that is going to be a significant increase.
Now,
But that's separate from our
That is
budget,
separate
that's a
from
separate
It
income.
has its
It will
own
talk
rep,
it-
its own
yeah,
millage.
It's coming to you.
It'll
we're just
come,
not
the
sure
only
when.
part of that budget that you'll see here is how much we take in and how much we give them.
Yeah, it's in its own fund, it
It's
has
in-
its
in
own
and out.
millage, it's not, it doesn't affect your
It's
general
a separate
fund.
millage, it's separate everything.
Okay.
so isn't there a percentage threshold though before the special assessment has to be?
10%.
Okay, so it will be, I mean, we're saying significant, it will be under the 10%?
Yep,
Yes.
well, Karen said
Well, not
significant, and
yeah,
but the
I-
reason she said that, let me clarify.
Thank you.
The reason she said that is, I think over the last 3 years, we've not, once we went up to 4 mills, we haven't raised it for the last 3 years. Had we raised it 1 or 2, 0.01, 0.02, we would have taken in a little more. We didn't. What's happened is, this is a 3-year contract. So for 3 years, it was just,
3-year
Writ-
union contract, right?
pardon?
3-year union
Union.
contract.
It's a 3-year union contract. So it's gonna be, the hit's gonna be now, and then it'll be okay for the next 2 years. So
Mm-hmm.
it'll appear to be a significant jump because of the circumstances. But then on the other side,
And in hindsight, I don't think we've ever really worked with the union, so we really didn't know what.
that was our first contract.
Yeah, and we didn't know what was happening out in other fire departments, so we didn't know what could happen, or I think we would have made the incremental raises.
Yeah, but we'll be okay. So, any other questions?
I saw looks like in the capital improvement, like the proposed, what I'm assuming, the expenditure of the $5 million, but
Uh-huh.
where's like the annual cost we think that's gonna be paying back?
Oh, for the debt, so that's in the
Yes.
general fund, and so that, it's about 200,000, so if you're in the general fund, it's 101,272 is the department. So it's like the 4th page of the general fund budget. So if you find, it should be Department
general
272, General Services. Go back one more, sorry.
Almost right in the middle of the page.
Yep, so then there's a line near the, it's in the middle-ish bottom, it says debt service Township Hall. And then it's about 200,000 a year. Now, again, that's based purely on that estimated
Oh, I
debt
see it.
schedule that, MCFI or whatever the letters are, but that they gave us. So obviously this could change based on whatever the debt ends up being, if there's debt, but that's just what that schedule was, so that's what we put in there.
I'm just so used to seeing, expenditures in like parentheses. That I
Oh.
kept looking for that, and I'm like, "Dang, where is that? Like, I'm seeing all these positives and I'm looking for the negatives, so
Yeah,
that makes
the whole
sense.
section is expenditures.
This
Yeah,
bud-
at the
this
first
budget's broke out
page-
into
The
revenues.
first page is revenue, and all the other pages of that general fund section are expenditures.
Got it, that
And
makes
then there's a
sense.
total at the bottom. So the change you're not gonna see on the bottom, because the change we put into other funds, or other account numbers. So like, for example, in the revenue section, there's a transfer from fund balance. That means that the fund balance is decreasing. But it's easier to see if you just look at that 3rd page you have of the notes. It shows change in fund balance, and it's right there, and it shows you that in fund balance.
Yeah.
That's an easier way to look at it.
Gotcha.
The other thing, just to help you understand, this is a budget, That's a projection on what we expect to spend. Through the course of the year, there will be times where we will come back and say we need to do a budget amendment. Maybe we put X amount of dollars in here for road chloride. The contract came back more expensive than we expected, and we're a little bit short. So we go and look somewhere else where we're not spending as much, and we say, we can afford to take money out of here, we'll put it over here. And that's a budget amendment, and we adjust. Because the bottom line is, at the end of the year, you have the audit, which are your actual expenditures. Actual revenues, actual expenditures. This is just a projection of what we expect to happen over the next
But
year.
also a legally binding document.
Yes.
Yes.
Which I think a lot of the public doesn't always understand, because I remember, I did corporate accounting before I did government accounting, and when you come in and you're like, oh no, the budget's important now. It wasn't important there, it was like, put together a budget, try to meet your numbers. You have to meet your numbers or you're in trouble.
Right.
And you get cited in the
With the
audit,
state,
Yeah.
discrepancies.
Interesting enough, on the local level, on the county level, and on the state level, we are required to have balanced budgets. It's only when you get to the feds that all hell breaks loose.
Yeah.
That's why they've tried to have the Constitution,
Amendment?
what do they call, what is it, they've been trying to get the meeting of the states.
Oh, yeah.
They don't have
Constitutional Convention.
constitutional amendment to force the feds to have a balanced budget.
They
Yeah.
should have a balanced budget.
All of us do.
We do,
They employ
exactly.
people
Why-
that audit us if we definitely have
Yeah.
an issue that doesn't line up on our taxes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, are there any other questions?
If you're still looking, feel free to, I know we gave you a whole giant stack of papers.
Actually, this is not a giant stack of paper. I've looked at budgets for other townships.
Oh, you don't do that all in one night.
I was gonna say,
We can do ours all in one night.
Yeah.
this is not a giant stack.
Heck,
of
even the
paper.
village, you don't wanna do that all
Well,
in
and
one
then,
session.
and we're available anytime you have questions or anything, feel free to
Right.
call.
And we're not
Yeah.
approving anything right now.
No, we're not.
Yeah.
Yeah. So these other three packages, are these just explosions of one line item?
No, those are other funds. So the first section is your general fund, so that's gonna be the big, most important fund, right? The second section that says PEG and Metro Act funds, those are special revenue funds, so the PEG funds can only be spent on public education, and the Metro Act can only be spent on improvements to the right-of-way. So those we budgeted to actually use, hopefully, coming forward. We've put it in next year's budget to finally use those monies, because we hope to use them at the new town hall. For the public education stuff, we could do stuff for like the setup for streaming our township meetings and things like that. For the Metro Act funds used for the deceleration lane in front of the building. So that's what those two are. There's not usually a lot of activity going on in there. You basically have your fee, we get Metro Act money once a year, we get PEG fees once a quarter, and then you have interest on the money over
It's
time.
been there for
You,
years.
Right.
you probably heard us talk about those when we were working with HRC on the development of the new complex.
Yeah.
And we said, so one of the things when they gave you budget projections on the costs, I said, there's a couple of these things that we can pay for outside of the general fund or the capital improvement, because we have the PEG funds. The one that's for education could go to pay for the sign in front of the building. Like she said, the one that's for roads, the acceleration at the farmstead, or the de-acceleration at the township. We can't put in an acceleration lane going east on Grange Hall because of the railroad tracks.
Mhm.
But we can extend the de-acceleration lane from Subway, and they actually have an acceleration lane in front of their building. We can continue that on to our driveway, which would become a de-acceleration as you pull into the property.
Yeah, we did. We put in the fencing and the landscape and the cemetery sign with Metro Act funds.
Yeah. And
Nice. Okay.
And then the next packet, that is for the building fund. So that's specifically fees people pay for building permits, and then the
It's the
cost
building,
of
it's the
the
building
special.
department.
Right, exactly.
are
So it's its own
completely
special fund,
yes.
because it can only be spent on those related activities. It is currently like kind of, we're we're eating up the fund balance because it had grown for a while, so eventually we will probably, depending on the activity, might need to increase the fees to cover the costs going forward.
Yeah.
But right now, we're trying to actually eat up that balance that had grown for a while in there.
Well, and you will find within the budget, are we still doing part of Christie's salary comes
Yes.
out of there?
Yes,
Because she runs the building department.
yeah.
So
and
part of her salary doesn't go into the general fund
It's
budget.
reimbursing,
It's being reimbursed. It's showing up as a revenue. in
And
here.
we're charging the building department rent per month for all of the room, that we're
For
using.
the space.
And we're doing file maintenance now for all the years, and actually we're melding all property files together regardless of their,
We've had a gal working
building.
for what, a couple months now?
yeah. Yeah, we've had one kinda off and on for, but she's doing really good, so,
Awesome.
yeah.
Which will make the move easier, because we won't have to carry any excess with us. The excess is
And
going.
then we're hoping to then, get our blueprint scanner and then start scanning all of the blueprints in, getting those attached to each of the file electronically, and then permanently put them in bins. We've bought some bins, we're starting to do some of that, and
Condensing.
then scanning. We haven't scanned yet. And that way, when we store them, they're stored, we don't need them.
Cool.
We won't be going in and out and having
Digging it
stuff,
back out, having to look at it,
everywhere.
yeah.
Right.
because we moved everything, all the files to make room for George's office all up here. And then all the stuff from the basement, and we had a water loss down there, and yeah, it's been a mess, so we're fixing it.
The last packet is the three like capital funds, so you have your capital improvement fund, that's where we've accumulated money from the general fund over time to do things like the town hall project. Right now, at the end of this year, it should have about 1.2 million in it, so that's gonna be part of what's gonna help pay for the $5 million project. The capital grants fund, that is specifically grants we've received in donations, and that's for the farmstead. So that's tracked separately, and it's only spent on the farmstead, and it's contained with like, use the grant for the farmstead, you know, so that budget is kind of an estimate, and if the actual costs for this year turn out higher or lower than we've estimated, then whatever's budget left over will be adjusted for the next year, so we don't lose any of that money, it's just an adjustment. And then the last,
One of the things I want to explain, because I've got new board members, when we talk about this money that comes in for grants for the farmstead project, that is literally the project, it's the northern end of the property. When it comes to the south house, the barn, and the north house, those are part of the property that the township's owned for years, and when we do work on those, we often get some grants to help us with it. But that money doesn't necessarily come out of the farmstead money.
Right.
Capital improvements or.
We are
It'll
gonna,
be, well, maintenance comes out of the general fund, and,
Okay.
right.
when we put in the gazebo, which is part of the farmstead plan, that's coming, you won't see that in here, because it's gonna be in-kind service. Shannon is gonna build that for us. They're gonna build that and develop that little area down there. I'm working on donors for different parts of the farmstead project as we go forward. But the actual maintenance for the existing two houses and barn, that stuff comes out of the general fund. We have done the roof on the barn, and we've done some work. Those came with some grants that we matched funds with
Mhm.
in both cases. So just so you understand, there's kind of a mix of what goes on up there. And anytime we come to you with a new project, we will explain at that time where that funding's coming and how that's happening. Go ahead.
oh, just the last fund is the road improvement fund, that's a fund we just created a couple years ago and started accumulating some money in. The plan for now is to actually move that money to the town hall project as well. And then ideally, as we have excess money in the future, we would put it here to accumulate for a future project. It's not necessarily designated for any one specific project, it was just, we had some extra funds and we wanted to start accumulating into a place, but now that we need funds for this project, we wanted to move that over.
At the same time, just so you understand, the creation of that road fund was because we get tri-party funds from the county. That means, and I'm gonna use a round number, if we get $75,000 in tri-party funds, 25 of that comes from the county commissioners, 25% of that is in-kind service from the road commission, which means the engineering part of the project. And then 25,000 would come from us. And we've, in the past, taken it from the general fund, but I created the road fund because we do know as the township grows, the day's gonna come where we're gonna, I mean, the day's kinda sorta here already, where we're gonna need to pave perhaps Quick Road, maybe Rude Road. Karen doesn't agree.
No, I don't agree with Quick Road either.
No.
Well, there's a lot of people that would, you've got a lot of traffic.
They're rough. I mean, it's
No, they're rough.
But-
They're
Well,
fun to
but
drive
it
on.
becomes a,
they're fun to drive
I
on.
love driving your road.
Once you,
Well, then
once
we
you
need
put
to
in
add
a
more gravel.
subdivision, once you finish those homes and condos and things up in that corner, you've created enough extra traffic
you're dumping a lot of traffic on it.
that
Yeah.
they're gonna need Quick Road as,
You're
as-
talking
as
Fish
a
Lake and
secondary.
Grange Hall?
Yeah,
Yeah.
If you look on a map, you can take, if you're coming in on Grange Hall Road, rather than going to the Grange Hall Saginaw
Yeah,
intersection,
You can,
if you live in the subdivision where you live or any of that new development, you could just turn right on Fagan Road, take Quick, and it takes you
I
right,
get
it's
that.
like
I
a
don't do
bypass.
that because it's bad to drive on.
So,
Yeah,
so my point was to start saving money because those things,
Right.
I know that the fire department has often said they'd love to see Root Road paved. You're not as, well, Jeremy was always going,
It could be improved.
and we know that the Kurtz Road Bridge one of these days is gonna have to be fixed. Point was, there are gonna be projects we're gonna wanna look
Yep.
at. And that's why we created it, cause we didn't have it. That pretty much covers everything, unless there's any questions.
pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I think it's very well organized.
All right, then I'm looking at 7-Eleven, not a party store, but the time. And
Now
if
you know
everybody's
everyone's
good,
service.
there's one more public comment, Chief Weil.
You pass that down. I don't need that, actually.
Then I think, what the hell did I do? with that?
I don't,
You
I don't
want
need it.
that?
No, that's fine.
Oh, your agenda.
Yep, so there's nobody for public comment, we'll go ahead and close this meeting at 7:11.
Not my favorite day to close at 7.
I got a 96 Sierra Ryan that I drive strictly dirt roads with. And listen to Alan Jackson. So listen to Alan Jackson, me and my son look at deer and we drive dirt roads.
I had extra copies if you want one, Matt.
You just get used to them.
Yeah.
You do.
I mean, you
She
gotta.
does
You know where the, I can drive Elliott Road
Yeah.
and know them swerves with my eyes closed.
But you'll know the number.
You know, Josh isn't here, we need to shut this down.
Oh,
I will say this,